Hi, this is Don Matteo, and you are listening to the Ought to Know Better podcast. Let's do this.
Leeds are shit.
We're recording, you know.
Oh, shit.
We're the good start. I don't think we've got the personnel.
You can fucking laugh all you want, you absolute bellend.
I think about things. That's why you lot are idiots.
A melted version of a dick that's been shrink wrapped.
The absolute elite shithousery of this. Elite shithousery. Good morning, folks. I am your host today. I am Gilly, and this is the latest episode of the Ought to Know Better podcast, Berardi and Cook After-Match podcast, talking about the Spurs defeat at home. I am joined by my capable assistant, Carl, who looks to have her fresh trim this morning. How are we doing, Carl?
Yeah. I'm doing all right. Yeah. I'm a little worse for wear, but you know, we'll deal with that afterwards. Be fine. I get through this.
There's not a hint of Audrey about you this morning. It's a sight to behold.
Is it unnerving? Is it?
Somewhat. I've seen Bren this morning.
Yeah.
He came round and picked some stuff up. Did Bren this morning, and he's had a trim of the beard. He's looking mighty fresh this morning, and not even slightly windswept in these conditions, which is quite a thing.
Whoa.
So,
yeah. So doing all right there.
Yeah. So, Spurs. I mean, I don't really know where to start on this one. Do we get the ref out of the way early on? Shall we get that sorted and put to bed? So, Carl, take it away. Just let's get the officiating out of the way so that we can actually talk about the stuff that we like to talk about.
The ref yesterday was absolutely shocking, and you could tell that he was definitely a Sheffield United fan because he's really pissed off with how their season's going. You can't say he was just bad for us overall. He was terrible for both teams. But I think he's basically incompetent, in my opinion. Some of them decisions he was given yesterday, it was just like I couldn't understand some of them. I genuinely couldn't understand some of them, and I was like, right, okay, he's clearly picking up a check here today. He's not actually doing his job to the fullest of his ability. And if anyone else in the role did that badly, they'd probably be sacked. I was talking to Barry yesterday back in Ireland, and even Jimmy. You know how impartial Jimmy is when it comes to refs.
He's not impartial at
Jimmy,
all. He's not impartial. He's firmly, squarely, let's be in the refs association.
On the ref side, yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't yesterday, according to Barry.
Wow.
Jimmy was very much apparently of the mindset that the ref was absolutely brutal yesterday. So when you've got someone like Jimmy saying that, and it says it all, really, doesn't it?
It does. We had him on as a guest a few times, didn't we? And when we'd spoken about things, we're sat here and we're fuming about the refs, and he's like, well, let's have a look at it, because actually, if you look at it like this and look at it like, and you know what, he tended to be able to change the narrative somewhat. So for him to be in that kind of mindset as well, really, really shows. So his name's actually Bramall, isn't it? I know you're saying he's a Sheffield United fan. His name's actually Bramall, which is, that's the thing. He was awful. And I think one of the things really early on made it really clear that if you were going to put a tackle in and somebody said, "Oh, that hurt," that was going to be a foul. And I think that, one of the things that a referee really needs to do is play the conditions. And so there were always going to be a little bit of late contact in a game like that with conditions like that. You're not going to get away from that. That doesn't mean that somebody's going in to hurt someone. Ampadu was booked for a tackle that, I'm looking at that and thinking, he's gone in to win the ball, and what else is he supposed to do? I think there were a few of them. I think on the flip side, one thing that we could have done to take advantage of that, Polina absolutely lost his head at one point. And I think that maybe an Ampadu that's not walking that tightrope of how physical can this game be, or somebody else that's got a touch of shithousery about him, I think that he was primed to get himself sent off. All you had to do was give him a little bit of needle at that point, and his head would have absolutely gone. And I think, there's an aspect as well around being canny in a game. Game management. it's not just about what you deserve; it's about what you take home. And I think on balance, you look at that and that. Oh, do you know what that is an
You're gonna have a
alarm?
Roy Keane moment here. Answer the phone. Just answer
No,
it.
it's just an alarm.
Who's ringing you? Are you sure?
No one ringing.
Just answer the phone, like, Who does that, like?
That is an alarm saying in 20 minutes you're going to be on a pod because I initially said 10:30 and I didn't want to miss it.
Fair play. At least you don't alarm set. Go on.
Yeah. So yeah, officiating absolutely dire. All round. There were. I don't think the referee got any real help from his assistants, but it was dire all round. So, line in the sand. We don't need to talk about that. We know it was shit. Let's move on. Starting lineup then. So, change from the last game. I think if you look at the way that we'd played, any surprise in the fact that we're unchanged, especially given where we are with injuries, Nonto and James still not available to us, etc. Any surprises for you?
I don't think so. I think at this point we're very used to how Farke is going to set up if he's on a kind of a run the way we were. And you can't really blame him either. Like when you look at the bench at the moment without Willie, without, Dan James, his options are very limited out wide. And I think based off the last couple of games, I think that probably is at the moment our strongest team until we get certain players back in. I don't think there was anyone on the bench yesterday that could have probably made a massive change in how we were playing, how we structured our possession and how we, moved the ball forward. I liked the fact that he went 3 at the back with about 15 minutes to go to try and get something from the game. He wasn't just happy with sitting back and taking a 1-0 loss or, 2-1 loss. I think he his selections were good, and I think his game management, I think, was better yesterday than it was against Bournemouth, where we absolutely should have taken all 3 points, and that was just down to a clerical error, I think, on his part, which he discussed on Thursday in the press conference, but he wouldn't admit to it. He's just making, he's just giving the manager spiel. But I think you can't really argue with the players that have been starting the last couple of games. You know what I mean? I think it's we have been solid, and when we were before the start of the season, we were very worried about teams being able to break us down. We were looking at the players we were bringing in who were going to be big, strong lads in the middle. And to be fair, Spurs identified that after about 15 minutes, where they weren't getting any joy through the middle. So everything started going out wide once they realised that we were very, very strong down the middle of the pitch. So I think his selection is justified. I know there's a few people who might think, Be-all should have come in yesterday at some point or probably have started. But when you've got 2 centre-backs who are playing quite well together, and bar Arsenal away, not conceding that many goals, and when they are, as we'll come on to later, they weren't great goals from Spurs that we conceded by any means. They were flukes, essentially. So I think you have to kind of look at the starting 11 and just be like, well, it's the strongest starting 11 we have. We've only seen small bits of Be-all at the moment. So, people are like, oh, he's good in the air. He's great in the air. Great in the air. But the 2 goals that came yesterday were nothing to do with being strong in the air. So we don't actually see or know or understand how good Be-all is. And I think to throw him into a game like that, where for me, when I used to coach, it'd take morale out of the starting 11 sometimes, because you've got a team that are working well together and doing their job. So I think the starting 11 yesterday was to be expected, and I was okay with it, to be fair. I don't think there was any changes needed really.
Okay, so I think coming off a good performance, albeit there was that sucker punch late on, but it was a good performance, and I think that the way that we've been playing, I think you are right. I think Darlow's been solid, and I think that's allowed Struijk and Rodon to play in especially with Ampadu in front of them and giving them that shield, has allowed that unit to operate together, and we have looked quite strong. Albeit against Bournemouth, that last header that Struijk didn't win, and Biol might have made a difference there. But these fine margins, and as you've said, they have looked fairly strong together and have been playing quite well. So I think making those changes in advance of this one, I think you're right. Personally, I think looking at this one, regardless of the fact that I think we were the better side in this one, we're in a position now where there's a bit of an international break, and then we go into sides that we should be beating. No, sides that we want to be beating, sides that we want to be competitive against, and sides that we need to look at to take points from when we play against them, because we expect them to be in and around us. I didn't mean should be beating. You need to earn your right to beat them, don't you? Sides that we have to be able to take something from, because then you're going to come up against Man City and Liverpool, and you might get something from it. But there's an expectation there that actually the amount of money they've spent on their squads, they ought to be running away with games like that against newly promoted teams. So we need to be realistic about it. But those are the sides that we have to be competitive against, the likes of Burnley and West Ham. So we mentioned Struijk already, so we'll stay on that. So given the fact that both goals came from Struijk, because they both deflected off him, which actually is really quite unfair. I'm not saying he scored two own goals by any stretch, but but we are in a position now where you could be training, looking at Burnley, looking at West Ham, thinking we're going to make a change. So if you're going to make a change, I think now is the time for it. I'm not saying necessarily that we have to make a change, but for me, it would fit. So there's two positions, neither of which will surprise anybody that's ever listened to this podcast, that it's Struijk and Arrington I'm going to talk about. But I would contest that that's our strongest 11, even at this point, because albeit he was quite poor, I think, when he came on yesterday and didn't really influence the game, I think Harrison in flashes, in his short appearances, has shown that he's fit. And I think we expect that as a minimum, because his physiology, he just keeps himself fit anyway, doesn't he? But he's looked quite sharp. So I would contest, and I'd be interested in comments of, I would be looking to swap Struijk out for Biol, and I would be looking to bring Harrison in for Arrington. I think Okafor's still got that bit where at a certain point in the game, it's getting later in the games, but at a certain point in the game, his fitness just drops off. It's like he starts running in treacle. And I think that there's an aspect there that I'm looking for Arrington to come on and be that puppy chasing a balloon kind of, players don't want to play against that late in the game, especially in the sort of conditions we saw yesterday. I think Harrison's got a lot more on the ball, and I think that's kind of what I'm looking at. But I also think, albeit we've not seen much of Biol, I think he is stronger. And Rodon's playing so well at the moment that he can do a lot of any shortcomings that either Struijk and Biol have got. But I think he needs to do less covering with Biol from what we've seen already. So, just a couple of positions there that I might be looking to change over the course of the international break and get them ready for. Thoughts, having said what you said before that?
Well, I think, like you mentioned there, it's a good trio to have at the moment, where you've got Struijk, Rodon, and Darlow all playing together, and they're understanding each other's game a little better. I think if you bring Biol in, I think that kind of pushes towards bringing Perry back in, because that would essentially be your starting three there. You've got Perry, your goalkeeper, and you've got Biol and Rodon, which were intended, I'd assume, on being the starting centre backs. Yeah. So I personally, if you were bringing them back in to start building a cohesive centre back pair in there, you'd need to bring in your number one keeper. And I'm not sure Darlow has done enough wrong for that to be the case. Yesterday he was very unlucky, Darlow. So it's just one of them. I think Struijk, we've discussed it, where the goals, they were very unlucky to go in. Like, you know what I mean? He's making a tackle, he's doing what he's meant to do, and it just so happens that bleeding, the deflection takes him away from Darlow. You can see Darlow's going for the first one. He's diving in the correct height. Everything's going well, and it's a last-minute clip off Struijk, and Darlow's completely caught out. And then it's the same with the second one. You can see which way the ball is going. Darlow's already made the move. It looks like a fairly standard save, and it takes a clip off Strike, and he's again wrong-footed, and it's gone in the opposite corner to the way he's anticipated it going. So, in relation to the centre back position, I think there's 2 weeks now where I don't think Bial is going to be going away on international duty. I think there was words said by his manager, his international manager there last week before the Bournemouth game, that were reiterated by Fark in his press conference about just needing to get time in his position to be able to cement a place. So, with the Strike thing, I think he's like Marmite for a lot of people. You either keep him in, people love him, they love what he does. I think that might be sentiment as well because of the whole Bielsa thing and all that as well. But at the end of the day, I think you need to be able to bring in players that are going to up the game and up the level of the defending, where you can take the worry off the goalkeeper. And I think if Bial comes in, I think he is that defensive solidity perhaps that we're slightly lacking. And this isn't a bleeding kick Strike in the nuts while he's down or anything. I just
it sounds like it can.
You've got an international centre back who's, was absolutely cleaning up in the Italian league. And thank you, man. That's been like that for weeks. Weeks, man. I've been looking at that, and every time I went to say it, someone else has started talking. I've been like, fuck it, I must say that to him some weekend. But that's been like that for weeks.
Cheers, mate. Thanks. For everybody listening on the audio pod, I've just turned around and straightened up one of the pieces of artwork behind me. That's a Gilly original, that, by the way. It's the lyrics to the ballad of Billy Bremner.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. While you've been talking there's been another question asked. So Steve Brown asks, do you drop Ampadu back to centre back and bring Tanaka into midfield? So I'll let you answer that one. But I'll ask it in a slightly different way. Have we been missing Tanaka's dynamism from midfield? I think is probably the question.
I saw that one when it popped up as well. I'm glad you started. I don't want Ampadu back at centre back. We've got two very capable centre backs to sit alongside Rodon. You don't pay the money you pay for Bial to put Ampadu back at centre back. I think what I put out a tweet last night in my drunken state after I got home. I think it's no slight on Stack, but I think it's time to freshen it up in midfield. Like you said, Tanaka's dynamism is something that we severely lack in that particular area of the pitch. And that's not me giving Stack any grief at all. I think he's been absolutely fantastic, but there's some games where he kind of drifts in and out a little bit more than you'd probably hope. And then with Tanaka, I think you've got that ability to hold the ball up firstly, I think, when he gets it in that 8 position in the middle of the park and be able to calm the play down when it gets a bit chaotic. I think Stack is more bunderbushed, where you get it and try and get it forward as quickly as possible. And sometimes we don't have the skill level to be able to do that. So I think when Fark makes a swap in midfield, I think it should be for whether Stack starting, it should be Tanaka coming on and replacing him, or vice versa. I think that's in game management terms, that would be how I would go about it. You're just swapping like for like there, but you're getting something a little bit different from Tanaka or Stack, depending on what phase the game is at. So I think they should always be the ones that are swapped out, rather than tinkering with so much more. We went to a back three yesterday. Ampadu said in between Strike and Rodon for the last 15. Grand, Tanaka came in. We still had the three in midfield with Longstaff and Bleeding Stack and Tanaka then. But it just, I think when you drop Ampadu too far back, they started to come through the midfield a little bit easier.
So
like I mentioned earlier,
go off for Tanaka.
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And I just thought
that was the way that he was able to get Nemecha and DCL and Pirot all up top, wasn't it? It was that sacrificing somebody in midfield, and then I think Harrison went to wing back, and then you're right, Ampadu that just dropped back in. So they had more in midfield. I think that's fair to say, but they'd already been playing in such a way that they were circumventing the midfield anyway. You're right. We were very strong. So if you look at the players that they had and who played well, I think you can't look past Kudus. He played really well. He got a goal, got an assist, I think. And that was the ability coming from out wide, because that's where they focused in order to be able to kind of bypass the midfield, because Ampadu, Longstaff, and Stack were playing well. And I think I think that dynamic, if you consider Championship leads and the impact that Rothwell had, he wanted the ball, he wanted to get on the ball, and he wanted to drive us forward, and it was really front foot. And I think Tanaka's got that in his locker as well, and he's got that ability to want the ball first off, but also to drive it forwards. I think one of the frustrations that the crowd experienced yesterday was that willingness to just pop it around at the back and not really get it forward. And I think there's a lot to be said for us having the ball. We know that Farke wants his teams to have the ball, but we really need to find a way to we are allowing sides to just set up. Thomas Frank is a canny individual and he knows how to set a side up. And I think that when we're in a position there where we're allowing them to get settled and get into their shape before we get it forward, we're going to come unstuck. And we don't have somebody that is a 10 that's got that ability to unlock a settled defence. You need to have somebody in there pulling the strings, lining it up, putting it on a plate for people, running it into channels for the fullbacks to get onto. And we don't have that individual that can do that, and that's why we've gone with that flat midfield. Longstaff, I think, is playing really well, and I expected him to. When we signed him, I'm like, that is a good signing. He's been really solid, and I think he's playing really well. I thought Ampadu played well. Interesting stat on Stack, though. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm going to read it out from Twitter. No player has covered more total distance in the Premier League this season than Anton Stack at 69.15 kilometres. That's the thing, isn't it? So he is getting around the pitch, and he's getting there, and he's doing the job that he's there to do. But I think there is an aspect of Tanaka's got that additional layer of dynamism on the ball.
He's a bit of a flair player in that 8 kind of role, isn't he, Tanaka? Where he like we saw it last year. There was times he got on the ball and his first thought was, I know there's going to be Jaden Bogle on the far side. I know there's going to be, Sam Byram or whoever on the left side, or Firpo. It was always just he got the ball, did his little pirouette in the middle of the park, and it was a straight ball over the back, the centre backs and the full backs for whoever we were playing. And they're the kind of things that Stack is a solid player, but I don't think he has the ability to just get the ball down and pick that pass over the top like that. Or, it's not a slight. He does a totally different job to Tanaka, and he's expected to do something a little bit different. So I think it's a good headache for Farke to have, having players of the quality that we do have at the moment, albeit some fans would say that we don't have that much quality. We were fine up until Willie and Dan James got injured for wingers, essentially. I think, especially with Okafor coming in, so it's hard to lay the blame at anyone's feet for the lack of creativity when we didn't actually buy a 10. Yes, I thought Pirlo done well when he came on yesterday.
Except the 49ers, we can blame them, right? The club ownership rather than the squad or the manager.
yes, very, very true.
Yeah, no, you mentioned a player there, so let's just touch on Okafor. I think he's one that's he's not the quickest over the ground, but he's got really quick feet, and I think that we're already seeing sides double up on him, and we saw that again yesterday. Porro was a player that I was interested to see him playing against because I thought we were going to get some joy there, and I think Bentancur and Romero provided quite a high level of shielding to Porro because I think Okafor had him on toast, and I think Gudmundsson probably had one of his weaker games for us. He's set a high standard. I'm not totally digging him out. He has set a high standard, but I think on another day we'd have got a little bit more joy there, because I think Okafor had Porro on toast. I think he played really well against him, and obviously he got his goal. But Jay wrote him off very early on, and I'm not going to let him forget it. So let's just touch on Okafor. He's the real deal, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah. We bought him essentially on like Opta stats for his ball progressions. And
I do mention Jay just as he's in the comments as well, so that's great timing.
We bought him for his progressive running stats. What was he? Something like the top progressive runner in Europe or something last season, or something like that, with 19 average runs or something. Yeah, something like that. I can't quite remember the full stat, but when you look at the reasons for buying him, it was basically because he progresses the ball quite quickly up the pitch and runs at players. Now, there is the element of, you have a player like that, he's going to lose it. And I think we as fans kind of need to look at that and be like, right, okay, if he loses it after progressing it up to their final third, then we can then regather ourselves and try and place the pressure on them to not let them get it out any further. And I think that's part of the game plan as well. I think he's been given the free ride to do that kind of thing, so that it takes the pressure off our midfield and we can regroup in dangerous areas that he's progressed us into. Yeah. The losing of the ball thing, it doesn't bother me at all, because I think 9 times out of 10 his final ball seems to be getting quite good when he does get it in the box. He had a good few runs to the byline yesterday. There was an effort where he could have potentially gone down inside the box and it would have been a look for a penalty, but he stayed on his feet. They're the kind of things that worry defenders, and I think that's the reason we bought him, because once we've lost, I don't mean to harp back, Rafinha, he was the same thing. He didn't lose the ball as frequently, but it was those progressive runs that we needed. I know it was in a totally different style and a totally different kind of team, but those progressive runs are things that we took advantage of when he did lose it, because he was so far up the pitch. We were able to swarm in and then close off any space around him. And I think with Okafor, the more game time he gets, I think that the better and more dangerous he's going to be. And I think him and Goodmanson are starting to, I think they're starting to build a good relationship on that left-hand side. The one criticism I would have of the two of them is that when when the ball breaks in our half and one of them, either Goodmanson or Okafor, start to break real quick, the other is quite inclined to not try and overlap as quickly. And I think that might be a fear of, right, okay, if I overlap and I don't get that pass, then we're screwed at the back, and I think that's something they need to work out between the two of them, when to go, when not to go. So I see Skip is in the comments here. My God, Carlo is reverting back to Raf. Get a room, for fuck's sake. It's just an example. I'm just using it as an example. They're kind of similar players in ball progression terms and stuff like that, and I just wanted to use it as an example. I'm not harping on about him, even though I'd have him back tomorrow. It's just
everybody in the world would have him in their side at the moment.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. And it's just, he's the prime example, because we haven't had a player like him since he left, really. And I think that's
never again.
It's something that we needed.
Depressing as that is.
Well, this is the thing. Well, it's always it's a case that if Okafor keeps going the way he's going, then we could have that player. It's a case of him settling in and understanding the game a little bit better, and just realizing that when he loses the ball, he just needs to get his arse in gear and retrieve that ball and don't leave.
Which I do think he's getting into. I do think he's starting to do a bit of that. And just so Jay says, just as an aside, I never wrote Okafor off. I just said I hadn't seen a lot from him at that point. Now I'm convinced we're screwed if he isn't in the side. I mean, that is ultimately, that's just backtracking. But at the same point, what I would say, because you've brought him up, so I'm going to comment on this as well, because I still get shit for having a go at Raf, but we're having a go at Raf for giving the ball away in our half. he wasn't progressing the ball and then losing it early on. He did. He absolutely did. And it was amazing after that. But very early on, it was just giving the ball away in areas that was hurting us. So I think you are right. I think, there is an aspect there that, I mean, just imagine where we'd be now if we'd not signed Okafor, because he's the threat. He's the one that tries to make things happen. And I'm absolutely fine him giving the ball away 8 times out of 10. If 2 times out of 10 results in him having a shot or setting somebody up with a really good chance, because that's what wingers do. Wingers give away the ball. That's fine. So, I think, but they give the ball away when trying to impact the game positively in the right areas. That's the critical aspect, isn't it? So, no, I think that is fair. So, just spend a little bit of time looking at the opposition, because there were one particular person that stuck out for me that allowed Spurs to set up in the way that they did. If you consider, DCL, I tweeted last week after the Bournemouth game and said that, I owe him an apology because I didn't know his game. He's an athlete. He really is an athlete, and he will put his body in there. He don't give a shit. He's up for everything. Completely the opposite of Pirot. That doesn't look quite as athletic. He sometimes when the ball's in the air, he doesn't even jump for it. I think that from that sort of perspective, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking he's winning pretty much everything. We didn't play to his strengths yesterday, but he was winning pretty much everything in the air. We really played to that against Bournemouth. He did so well against Bournemouth. It was a really good performance. I thought he was quiet yesterday. But if we just look at his physicality and the way that he played, and the way that he plays, what he doesn't have is blistering pace. But you look at Mickey van der Ven for Spurs, and he allows them to set up in the way that they do. And Polina in midfield, albeit he lost his head yesterday for a little while, he's a bit of an animal. And I think Romero's a very good player, reads the game really well, and he's a leader at the back. But van der Ven is so fast. I mean, we're used to seeing Rodon, but van der Ven's so fast that they can really push up the pitch, and they know for a fact that unless we've got Dan James, admittedly, that there isn't anybody that can even match him, let alone beat him for pace. So they can push on so much and press in that way and then apply pressure to the opponent. I thought we did deal with it quite well. But what we didn't, I don't know if you noticed, but DCL a couple of times dropped back to Darlow and said, look, just put it on. And he said, you could see him saying, put it on Romero so I can run off him. And we did try it a couple of times. But Van der Ven's that quick, he just covers it. He's just across and he's just taking it away. And it allows them to set up in that way. And I think that that was one of the things that, not being able to have a 10 and then play the channels accurately and put somebody in that way, and not having somebody up front that's got that blistering pace, I think that meant that they could set up in that way.
Absolutely. I think it's a strength that they have that other teams wish they had. Because, like you said, it's the solidity that he provides for them when they're on the break and it's turned over quickly. They know they can rely on him to be able to get back, cover any balls. Like, he does Rodon's job, but with 5 times the pace. And that's
it's a cheat code. And that's honestly, it shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, that's not a slight on Rodon. He does everything Rodon does. He's just a little quicker. And Rodon's quick. I know Moses is going to be absolutely giving us grief for this now because we're picking on Joe. But he does allow them that freedom to express themselves a little bit further up the pitch than we can allow ourselves. And the fact that you've got that Simmons lad in the middle of the park, I think he was really good yesterday. I thought out of all of their players yesterday, he was probably the best. I know your man got 2 goals, but I'd be honest with you. I've seen a few.
When you say your man got 2 goals,
videos,
do you mean strike?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I know they're accredited to that guy. Like, kudos. Like, but kudos and
Tell scored one of them. Kudos got an assist and a goal.
Yeah. I just think I've seen a few Spurs, vlogs online after yesterday and stuff like that, and they're coming out with this notion that they were so much better than us, and they were on top of us the whole time. And I'm kind of sitting there and I'm looking at it. I'm like, granted, it's a 2.5 3-hour train ride from London to Leeds. But Jesus Christ, lads, put the vodka away at that hour of the morning, will you, for God's sake? Because you were watching two totally different games to the one I was watching, where for 70 odd minutes, they were like, I mean, I don't mean 70 minutes, from start to 70. I mean, like, overall, in the whole context of the game, for 70 minutes, they were terrible. They weren't the same. Yeah, there you go. Proof is in the pudding there. Absolutely in the pudding. Like, and to say that they felt that was their turning point is kind of sad, considering the money they've spent. And they're looking at a result like that against us, a newly promoted side, I add. I genuinely don't see where they're getting that from. And that graph, that momentum graph, that proves it all. Like, look at the phases in between where we're dominating and they get 2 deflected goals. Look at those. Like, there's nothing in that. They've done nothing. And that's down to the fact that we closed them off in the center of the midfield and they started going out wide. But I want to just point something out there. That was Farke's first loss to Frank in, I think, like 8 games or something like that. And I was just wondering, was Farke playing the same way he would have normally against Frank when he was at Brentford and they were at Norwich? That kind of way where I've beaten him this way before, I can beat him that way again. And maybe that kind of didn't play to how we probably wanted to go into the game. Maybe, like you mentioned there, last week against Bournemouth, even when times weren't that tough on us, we were still launching it to Calvert-Lewin, and he was winning absolutely everything. And maybe reverting back to that. I know it's not pretty football, but at the moment, we don't have the creative midfield to be able to play out from the back, to get players into positions, to be able to create openings from nothing. So when people say, "Oh, you're bypassing our midfield," it's like, yeah, but what creativity have we in there that allows us to not bypass the midfield? You know what I mean? And maybe Farke kind of looked at that and went, right, okay, well, but the standard of player that Frank had when he was at Brentford compared to when Farke played him when he was at Brentford it's a million miles apart. Like, you know what I mean? You've got solid internationals in there, and you've got centre backs who have got more pace than some wingers, and it's a totally different standard. And I think maybe Farke, not a criticism of him by any means, but I think maybe Farke looked at that and went, yeah, I've done it before, I can do it again, but different ball game now, I think, so it's one of those. I just think the Spurs fans should potentially not be getting on any high horses, because regardless of your position in the table going into the international break, they celebrated like they'd won the league online against us. And it was like, lads, we're a newly promoted team. You need to kind of wind your necks in there. Like, it's not great.
I couldn't disagree more, Carl. I couldn't disagree more. They've won a game that they shouldn't have won against Premier League opposition away at our place. And in a sold-out ground, if you can't celebrate that, what can you celebrate? No, they've got away with one, and they know they've got away with one, so celebrate it. No, yeah. Just to touch on. So, just while Carl's been talking, we've had the attack momentum graph for anybody that's just listening on the audio pod, and it does show that we've dominated the game. I'm not in any way a stats nonce, but I'm just going to cover some of the stats, because I think there are real mixed opinions online. Yeah, there are real mixed opinions online as to whether we were the better side or not. And I think if you look at the two managers' breakdown of it, Frank doesn't even talk about that. He just says the mentality that it needed to be able to beat Leeds. By which I assume he means the diving, play acting, cheating. But from a Farke perspective, he says we were better in all regards. And I think if you look at the possession stats, we had 57% of the ball. XG is not something that I really rate, but our XG was 1.68. Theirs was 0.53. Big chances, we had 4,
Yeah.
they had 1. Total shots, we had 16, they had 9. Goalkeeper saves, Dallo saved 1, Vicario saved 3. We had 4 times as many corners than they did. They only had 1. They've fouled us more, they've passed less, they've made fewer tackles, they've had fewer free kicks, and they've had more yellow cards. Yeah, I think in terms of the stats, every single stat, I'm using SofaScore for this, every single stat on that is in our favour. And I think that tells you a lot about, we're going into that game playing against the Champions League side that's currently sitting in 5th. And I think a lot of people had looked at their past couple of games, in Europe and the game before, thinking, oh, they're on really bad run of form. Those 2 games in particular, and they've had a lot of injuries themselves, but those 2 games in particular, they've not played particularly well. But they were still in 5th in the league. They've not had a horrendous start to the season. They've been all right. And I think I did see quite a few people online, at least, say, no, at home we'll do them. And I think that's an aspect that we need to get used to. We are coming up against £1 billion plus squads. And we're not just at that level yet. And I think there's an aspect there that when that's happening. So I did star a comment earlier, and I'm just going to come back to that now. It was about the amount of time that we've got. So I can't actually see it now.
Oh shit!
Yeah, no. There we go. It's skipped.
It was a
morning all.
Oh.
But what is still a little frustrating is that some of our players still think we're playing Championship football and we're expecting more time on the ball. And I think there is an element in that. We've lost the ball in midfield in the games that we've played so far. We've lost the ball in midfield, and it's just created an opportunity for the opposition to score. And I think there is an aspect of that. That will come in time. It is a step up. Even Ampadu, even Rodon, who have been in Premier League teams, it is a step up, and you've got to settle in and get used to it. But there's also quite a level of, Okafor's new to the country, new to the league, Goodmanson. We're looking at players, Stack as well. Longstaff, DCL, those are players that have played in the Premier League, and I don't think they're guilty in the same way. But there is an aspect of just getting used to it. You look at even Henry, that might have been the greatest striker the Premier League's ever seen. It took him 12 to 18 months to really get going. So we're expecting a lot of these players. We're a handful of games in. We're expecting a lot. So I think there is something in what Skip's saying there, and that's why I started, because I do agree with him. And it's something that we're going to have to address and address quite quickly. But overall, I don't think you can get away from the fact that we deserved at least something from the game. I think the fact that we've kind of hamstrung ourselves by giving the ball away in midfield and by Struijk being so slow, we've hamstrung ourselves somewhat, but still the stats show that we more than matched them. And I think that's the important aspect that we need to remember is we've more than matched a Champions League side. We need to turn the more than matching into genuine points. But now we're coming up against Burnley. Now we're coming up against West Ham. That's the opportunity to do so, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there as well. But I just wanted to put something at you after reading those stats. Do you think it's a little worrying that we've got stats that look the way they look, the ones you've just read out against Tottenham and all that? Do you think is it a little worrying that we're not actually putting these games to bed when we've got that much momentum going in our favour?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. I think that's something that needs to be looked at and rectified potentially.
Yes. So we spoke at the end of the transfer window, didn't we? And I think that overall, from a podcast, our view was we need to be in touch by January so that we can sign somebody that can come in and make a difference. And I think it is that creative force. Pirro looked quite sharp. He looked all right, playing off somebody up front. Now, I don't think we did enough to get the ball into those attackers. But he looked. There was somebody else made a comment as well on Pirro, and I'm just going to see if I can find it now because Steve Brown said Pirro was decent playing off a 9. That's his best position, but we can't accommodate him in current formation, and I think that's absolutely right. If you look at the ability we've got in midfield and that running, if you're bringing Pirro in, you're losing Stack, or you're taking somebody out that's playing well, Longstaff or Stack ideally, because you're not going to bring Ampadu out of that side and the position that he plays. But at this point in time, can we afford to take out of the midfield to be able to play Pirro? Maybe we can against Burnley, maybe we can against West Ham. We certainly wouldn't be able to do against the likes of Spurs and the ability they've got in midfield, because for me, there's just not enough in that covering the ground, adding that solidity in midfield.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the one thing we kind of all tend to agree on, is that Pirro, for all his good finishing, his pressing is a little bit lacking. I think we hark back to it, like his best pressing game for me was that Norwich playoff semi-final.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not, again, who was it earlier on? Was it Danny or Steve that was giving me grief for Rafinha earlier on? I can't remember. I'm not harping back to it, but that's potentially the last time I saw Pirro press the way he should be pressing. But again, he's also not that type of striker either. He's the type of striker where you get the ball into his feet and he finishes. You know what I mean? It's like a double-edged sword there. Like we've got a player who can finish. We've seen he can finish, but the way to get him to finish is we need the ball into his feet, where he's in positions to do that. But if you want him pressing, he's not going to be in those positions to do it, which is frustrating as shit. But if we, again, like you said, if we're closer to, kind of mid-table in January, that gives us the opportunity, like you mentioned, to bring in a creative player where could potentially allow Pirro to do that. I'm not saying it will. I'm not saying Farke's going to change his strategy completely, but we need to, look at how we get the best out of certain players that we already have, and a potential number 10 or a very, very, very creative midfield could be that key to unlock what we need to get out of Pirro in a more creative way, rather than, right, launch it up to Calvert-Lewin, we'll try and get a knockdown, try and get in by the wings, do it that way. Whereas you've got a number 10, if Pirro's floating around the place, finding the space in between centre-backs and full-backs, that's what he needs. We've seen him finish. We know he can finish from pretty much any angle. So maybe we just need to look at that kind of thing moving forward for January, where, right, okay, the Calvert-Lewin thing, they've sussed it out now. They know we're going to launch it. They're going to sit deep from goal kicks or sit deep from a back pass to keeper, because he's going to start launching it forward. Whereas if you have that creative player, you can then look to build from the back, like we were trying yesterday. But I thought yesterday was the wrong game to do it. Yesterday was get it to Calvert-Lewin as quickly as possible, and we need to close in and win the second balls. So it's a swings and roundabouts kind of thing, really. Like, we have a player there that can finish. We just can't accommodate him, because at the moment we need him to press, and he doesn't press.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah, it is. But one of the things that I mentioned in one of the group chats this morning was that chance that DCL put in the stands in the first half into South Stand, where he's on the edge of the box. Pirro works the keeper from there at the very least. You kind of expect him to score from that sort of chance, because he had time, he was able to have a touch, he was able to set himself. And the players that we've got on the pitch, Okafor aside, Aronson is not a player that you want to have time at the edge of the box. What you want is for it to come to him with no time to think about it at all. And that's where the goal came from, is the ball ricocheting to him, landing to him, and him just having a snapshot. If you give him time to think, he's going to... If you give him time to think, he's going to fuck it up. If you don't give him time to think, there's a chance that he's going to be able to do something. Now, that's part of the frustration, actually, is that you want your winger to get on the ball and create stuff, and he doesn't do that. But what he can do is shown that yesterday, if he doesn't have time to think and it's just a reaction, that he's actually got a level of capability that we can then take advantage of, which Okafor did. I thought he was quite poor from Vicario at that point, to be honest. He just palmed it into Okafor's path, but we benefited, so great. But Pirro, back to that DCL chance. Pirro works the keeper there at the very least. You're looking him to score from there. So I think there's definitely something in what you're saying. I think we still aren't in a position where we're playing to DCL strengths. Maybe by January we have settled into that, and yet maybe you're right, and we will need to change it up. But I think that that aspect where part of what hurts us, and I'm not going to keep harking on about Arrington, but part of what hurts us when he's on the ball is Bogle doesn't want to give him the ball. None of the strikers lay it off to him because they all know that if he's in space, he's going to get the ball, he's going to do too much, and he's going to lose it. So it is that crashing in and that Red Bull football that we all hate, penis formation and everything else. That's what he's good at. That's what we don't like. So, or at least that's what I don't like. But I think the one thing to say is he's not been completely useless so far this season. He's playing above himself. It doesn't make him good enough, but he's playing above himself, and we need to take advantage of that while it's happening because Nonto and James are unavailable. So, we need him to either come on or we need him to start. There's no getting away from it. We've got 3 wingers available, so we need him to do something. And at the moment he is, so fine. But I think that the shape of the game changes altogether. If you've got somebody in that 10 that is able to pull the strings, able to play the ball into the channels at the right way so that somebody's running onto it and having a shot without having to take a touch and all of that sort of thing, I think that changes the shape and the setup from an opposition perspective. They're looking at our midfield and they're going, do you know what? They are strong in there. Ampadu's playing well. Stack's playing well. I think, in that sort of, and covering ground and making the challenges, I think, it might have surprised some people as to how well Longstaff's doing, but the 3 of them in there are working as a really good cohesive unit. Taking anything out of there to play a 10 gives us a lot more in attack, but takes away a lot of our solidity as well, I think. And getting that balance right is a challenge. It's going to be difficult, not getting away from that. But is it that position where you need a little bit less solidity if you're offering a lot more attacking threat going forward? And I think that's the balance that Farke needs to find. If we can find that player that can come in and play in that 10 role. We were linked with a lot. I don't think Harry Wilson was the right player for us, but he would have made a difference. We would be better with him in the side than Arrington. I think there's few people that would argue that point. So, and he's another one that is an established Premier League player. He's been playing in the Premier League for an extended period. So I think, being able to do that, his name escapes me, but your man that played at Norwich under Farke and is at Villa, we've been linked with for years, it seems, in the 10. Your audio's gone. I can hear that you're trying to help me, but your audio's gone. Tell you what, do you want to just drop out and come back in and I'll just spin through some of the comments? I think Carl's either very distraught or he's crashed altogether now. So, yeah, you sort that out. Jay will be enjoying this a lot. Because we were buen dia. Oliver's right, it was buen dia. You might have been saying that, but we couldn't hear it. I'm just going to spin through some of the comments. So Steve Brown says that was another game that we should have got something from, created plenty of chances and conceded 2 poor goals. Absolutely. Yeah. That's boiling down everything that we've just said in this entire podcast to 1 or 2 lines, but I don't think that can be argued. Liam B says strike needs to be changed. Billy All, I think he said there. Be all in for the next match. I think I do agree with that. I think there are people that would look at it and go, well, he's quite unlucky. On another day, he just gets a little bit more on those shots and they don't end up flying past our keeper, Darlow. But, be that as it may, that did happen. And, the sucker punch for Bournemouth came from Strike as well. So I would change it too. Are you back with us, Carl? Still no audio, I'm afraid. I'll carry on with the comments. Steve Brown again. Defensively yesterday, we conceded too much space for both goals. We kept backing off and letting Spurs run at us. Need to engage them further up the pitch. I think that's right as well. And I think there is an element further down the comments that we kind of... I'm just going to skip forward to it, actually, because it's Luke B that says, newly promoted side, but we've shown in all games, excluding Arsenal, we belong and we will compete in this league. I think that's true, and I think the Arsenal result is what it is. Every now and again, one of those Champions League teams will just get on a run at you. They'll score early on. It changes the context of the game, and then you're chasing, and you don't want to be in that position early on against a side like that that's been able to invest so much in their squad. But he goes on to say, need a few of our squad to believe in themselves, showing some teams too much respect. I think an aspect of that is really what Steve was talking about there, where we're conceding too much space for both goals, backing off and letting Spurs run at us. I think that is true, and I think that might be showing a little bit too much respect. Especially on balance of the fact that we were the better side. So I think there is an element of that. So yeah, I wouldn't argue with anything that Steve said there. And we've got Steve again that asked the question about dropping Ampadu back to centre back and bringing Tanaka into midfield, which we covered earlier on in the podcast. Johnny Brown hopefully recovered from yesterday's antics. It was his birthday weekend. I think his birthday might be Monday, but it was his birthday weekend. So happy birthday to friend of the podcast, Johnny Brown. It says, stack off the pace yesterday. Ampadu and Longstaff, brilliant, I thought. Tough one to take yesterday, 2 deflected goals. That's all. Ultimately, that absolutely was the difference. So, yeah, can't argue with anything Johnny said there either. Danny Talks Leeds has been in the comments all along. Welcome along, Danny, and good morning and all of that sort of stuff. Says, and I want your opinion on this, Carl, if we can hear you this time, is Stack doing what people have a go at Aronson for the running about? I think that's covering that's in response to the comment that Stack covered more ground than any other player in the Premier League so far this season. For me, it's the level of control. He doesn't look like a puppy chasing a balloon. Thoughts? You're frozen now. So we don't even have video. Right. Okay. Oh, hang on. You're moving? No, but there's still no audio, so I'll just carry on. I see where you're coming from, Danny, and I think that there is an element of truth to what you say in that he is covering a lot of ground. But for me, it is that control. I think he's doing the pressing that we need our, let's say, advanced midfielders to do. But I don't think anybody has a go at Aronson for the running about. It's his ability on the ball, especially when he's got time on the ball, and the looking like he's in a position on the pitch with the ball that if you trade in Okafor, James, Nonto, they're going to create something, and something's going to come of it. And largely, what Aronson does is either stop and play the ball back into midfield or to his fullback, or run into traffic and just make the wrong option. And I think that's what people have a go at Aronson for, not the running about. The running about is his strength. It's more about that inability to really take advantage of promising positions on the pitch when he's got the ball at his feet and he needs to make a decision. I think that's ultimately the issue. I think Stack's different in that. I think he does look good on the ball. He's a progressive ball carrier. Maybe not quite as dynamic as Tanaka in that, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast. But that for me is the difference there. That level of control. I'm going to keep talking until Carl shows me that he's got some audio back, because he still doesn't. So Gav Moores is saying, we're just missing that quality in forward areas. We had enough good opportunities yesterday. I think that's also a theme across the course of the podcast that we've seen from comments and we've said ourselves. And the last one I've starred is Steve Brown again. When we threw Metro and Piron, we still kept passing the ball sideways instead of launching it forward. When we did, DCL won the ball and the keeper made a great save from Piron. That is a level of frustration, isn't it? Partially, maybe, because we dropped one person out of midfield in order to be able to have that extra attacker on, so we just didn't have the ball in midfield as much. But yes, DCL is brilliant in the air, and we had 2 attackers there that needed to be in and around him, that should be close to him because they were playing up front, not on the wing and whatever else. So I think there's an aspect there that we did create from that. And it was, Vicario did make a good save from Pirro. It was a good effort, and on another day that flies in. So that goes back to the point I was making before about we're not really playing to DCL's strengths still. He's so good in the area. I mean, he surprised me at how good in the area he is. He wins almost everything, and we really need to get players in and around him for when that happens. And I think that's what I mean by playing to his strengths. We can play a long ball into him. He's going to win it, and there's going to be knockdowns for people to feed off. He's not somebody that's going to come in and score 20, 25, 30 goals in a season, because he's not that sort of player. But we're just in a position where we've got to take advantage of the strengths that he does have. So those are the starred comments. I'll just come back into the comments that have come in while I've been talking them through. Jay's really angry about this game. He's saying, but at least the competed doesn't keep us up. Too early to worry about something, but we need to try and solve. Yeah, that is true. That is absolutely true. I don't know why he's asking about Billy Idol. Never mind. We'll ignore that one a little bit. Aaron's in the comments as well. Wilson would get the balls to DCL well, and like you say, well, flapping the PL is an established player here, enough to give that extra to keep us up, improving the summer. I think that, those sorts of players really do offer us that additional something that are established in the Premier League, and I think that's an important aspect, and that's why when we look at Longstaff, he's carrying that because he's come in with a Premier League pedigree, over the course of years, and that's an important aspect. Right, okay. It was a response to how you read Biol from that other comment. Right, okay. Billy All. Billy Idol. Got it. So Jay is pointing out the fact that Carl's exceeded his mandated internet time. The government has shut him down. Fair comments. We're still in a position where we've not got him. I've just had one last question. Gilly, any changes you make versus Burnley? I don't know if you were along all the way through, Oliver. Carl, I think, has said that he would remain static with the team and stick with the team that's done well in recent weeks. You can give me a thumbs up or otherwise on that, Carl. But for me, okay, he's wavering a little bit, maybe through the course of the podcast, wavering a little bit. But so for me, Carl Darlow has done absolutely nothing wrong. He's been beaten by 2 unlucky goals in this one. I don't think he could do much about the goals against Bournemouth. For me, he's played really well and he's offered a solidity. So I would not be looking to change him at this point. Goodmanson and Bogle, I think, were quite poor against the levels that they've shown so far this season. I don't think they were terrible by any stretch, but they weren't at the level they have been. Rodon's one of my favourite players, and I would be keeping him, but I would be bringing in Biol for Struijk. Stack, Ampadu, Longstaff. I think that I would be staying with them. They do offer us a solidity. Tanaka's knocking on the door to get in, but I think he is effective from the bench, and he's pretty. I want him a bit further forward. He was dropping back into defence when he came on as well, and I want him a bit further forward and on the ball. But for me, Longstaff's playing really well. Stack carries the ball so well and is strong in there, and Ampadu kind of makes us tick. So I'd be staying with those 3 in midfield. Okafor looks at it. His feet are so quick, as I say, it's getting later in the game that he has that physical drop off. It was like 55 minutes at first, but yeah, I think Okafor's probably our most dangerous player at the moment, so I'd be keeping him in. Calvert-Lewin, I don't think did much wrong. We didn't play to his strengths. We didn't get him into the game enough. I don't think he did much wrong, but I think against Burnley, it'd get a bit more joy, and I'd swap out Aronson for Harrison, just on the principle that I think he's just got that bit more about him when he's on the ball. So I think, until such a time as we get James and Nonto back. I mean, I don't think there's anybody kidding themselves that Aronson gets anywhere near the starting 11 if we've got a fully fit squad. So I think we are in that position where we need to be able to carry a threat, and he just doesn't. So I would be swapping him out for Harrison, who I think has looked quite sharp when he's come on, albeit didn't really influence the game when he came on yesterday. But it was very small amount of time before he dropped back to full back or wing back at least. So yeah, in terms of changes, I would be changing Struijk and I would be changing Aronson to answer the question. Jay says, I think Struijk being dropped is the only change moving closer to happening. Probably also accurate. I'm not saying those changes are what will happen. I'm saying those are the changes I would make. I'm going to finish this up there. Let's all get sorted and get well into our Sunday roasts. Let's look forward to not seeing Dan James play for Wales and getting back fit, because we really, really need him. And I don't really care about a friendly against Wales. I don't really care about watching England in friendlies at all, to be honest. So enjoy next weekend, because there's no Leeds to ruin it for you. And let's get into Burnley after that. There will be a couple of main podcasts in between. So join us probably Tuesday night and then the following Tuesday, because I'm not certain, even if it clashes with anything, we really care, because it's only internationals and it's only friendlies. And who really gives a shit? So at that point, we will wrap it up. And we will see you back here on Tuesday. I'm going to say thank you to Carl, who can't thank me back or say goodbye to anybody or anything like that. I'm going to thank everybody. Oh, hang on. No, well, that's backwards. Bye from me. Thanks for hosting. Cool. I'm having to read it backwards, but we got there in the end. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, everybody in the comments. It really does help keep things ticking over, especially when one of us ends up talking to themselves. And if you can, just go do a like. Is it a bell that you click to subscribe to us on YouTube and like and share and do all of those bits? Yeah, these bits down at the bottom and all of that sort of stuff. Thank you very much for spending your Sunday morning with us, and we'll see you again soon. And I need to pad now because I've not got the outro lined up. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.